Hello everyone, my name is Sage, and today I'm going to tell you a bit about a story called Crime and Punishment. That title sounds pretty self-explanatory, doesn't it? I mean, it makes sense because this book is about a horrendous crime and the punishment that results, but the story is not as simple as it sounds. Crime and Punishment, written by the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky, has its own powerful messages drawn from his life experiences in conflicted Russia that go beyond the actions and the events in the story. That's why I'm going to demonstrate to you that Dostoevsky skillfully exposes issues with Russian society through Crime and Punishment by emphasizing the negative impacts of poverty on the nation and the conflict between Slavic and Western worldview beliefs through central focus on his main character Raskolnikov's life, Raskolnikov's experiment in living, symbolism in characters, and character foils. Now usually, the life experiences of an author impact themes in his work. So, to start, let's look at the life of the author, Fyodor Dostoevsky. He lived from 1821 to 1891 in the country of Russia, and in his lifetime, Russia was dealing with lots of inner turmoil. Poor Russians lived in filth and destitution because they couldn't escape their financial burdens. There also was a worldview conflict in Russia that had the Russian intellectual circles in turmoil. Two belief systems were competing with each other. First, the new Western philosophies introduced by Europeans, and second, the traditional Russian Orthodox beliefs. Western philosophies introduced worldviews like naturalism, nihilism, utilitarianism, and atheistic existentialism to the Russian people. Westernizers were people who thought that Western principles could solve the problems that Russia was facing. According to these beliefs, subjective reality and morality ruled people's decisions. On the other hand, the traditional Russian worldview sought out the answer for social problems in traditional Christian practices and the values of the Russians. Those who followed their cultural roots were called Slavophiles, and they relied on their morals and faith to search for the solution to Russia's turmoil. Dostoevsky sympathized with tradition and sided with the Slavophile outlook. Dostoevsky lived in a troubled social environment that was upset by poverty and a worldview conflict. Like many authors, he used these issues of his day to create themes in his story. These two themes in Crime and Punishment are poverty's negative impact on society and showing that Christian beliefs were better than the flawed Western beliefs. Dostoevsky uses his story to prove these assertions about the topics of poverty and worldview belief. Now you might be wondering, what happens in this story anyway? Well, the story of Crime and Punishment follows a young, impoverished student named Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. He is struggling with debt, and like Dostoevsky, he is dealing with two conflicting worldview beliefs. Raskolnikov decides to turn from his Christian roots to follow European philosophies. Because he chooses to follow Western beliefs, he uses their subjective morality to justify brutally murdering his landlady so he won't have to pay his debt to her. For the rest of the story, he is able to literally get away with murder by avoiding arrest, evading the police during questioning, and even outright lying. Soon, however, paranoia sets in, creeping into every corner of his mind, and his guilt just grows. He gets afraid that people will find out what he did and that he'll be sent to prison. Eventually, he tells his Christian friend Sonia what he did, and she persuades him to reveal the truth. Raskolnikov admits that he murdered his landlady, and he accepts his punishment in the end, but now he has the hope of a new future after he serves time in prison. Through Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky highlights his two themes: poverty's negative impact on society, and the fault with Western worldview. But how does he show these themes? Well, he uses literary devices to highlight them in an artistic way. Dostoevsky used many literary tools, but some of the more prominent ones are central focus, experiment in living, symbolic characters, and character foils. Let's start with central focus. As defined by Somerville's Poetics, central focus is the center of a whole arrangement. What is the central focus of this story? Dostoevsky's main character, Raskolnikov. He is poor and his surroundings are destitute, he's in debt, hardly able to clothe himself or feed himself. By focusing on his main character, Dostoevsky is able to show us the unfortunate life Russians had to lead, and Raskolnikov's economic struggles emphasize how awful it is to have to live this way. In addition, by focusing on Raskolnikov, Dostoevsky reveals that his character believes in Western philosophy. Raskolnikov believes that all people are divided into ordinary and extraordinary groups. The ordinary people live lives of strict obedience to the law, and the extraordinary people can forge new paths to obtain goals, even to the point of breaking the law. He says, quote, "The extraordinary man has a right to permit his conscience to step over certain obstacles if it is absolutely necessary for the fulfillment of his idea, on which quite possibly the welfare of all mankind may depend." This follows the atheistic belief that humans can form their destiny by shaping the world to their own personal beliefs, or, in other words, live by your own morality. Dostoevsky obviously wants us to see this view as an incorrect way of living because Raskolnikov steps over his obstacles by murdering his landlady. Incidentally, the central focus on Raskolnikov exposes his experiment in living. A character's experiment in living is the choice the character makes to act and live according to particular beliefs. Obviously, Raskolnikov's choice is to murder his landlady. According to him, his landlady, Alonya Ivanovna, is a stupid, senseless, worthless, and decrepit old hag who is of no use to anybody and who actually does harm to everybody. Because Raskolnikov believes in Western philosophy, he feels that it is best to act in accordance with the dictates of one's own conscience. Since she is doing more harm than good in society, Raskolnikov feels justified to murder her according to his belief that it is best to act with the welfare of all mankind in mind. Therefore, according to his beliefs, his murder is justified by his beliefs in acting for all mankind in his personal morality. However, the experiment in living does not turn out well for Raskolnikov. He suffers anxiety, illness, and a conflict of conscience because of what he did. His experiment was based in Western values, and by having Raskolnikov's experiment end in suffering, the author makes his opinion on Western beliefs clear. They are flawed and wrong. Another device employed by Dostoevsky is symbolism. He specifically uses characters to symbolically represent different themes. Firstly, Raskolnikov symbolizes the schism between various ideas that divided Russian thinkers and writers in Dostoevsky's day, these ideas being the Slavic beliefs and the Western beliefs. His experiment in living demonstrates that Western worldviews are indeed flawed, and thus he is a symbol of these flaws that Dostoevsky wanted to point out. Secondly, Dostoevsky uses friends of Raskolnikov, the Marmeladov family, as symbols of poverty-filled lives. The father of this family is very poor, and he drowns his sorrows in excessive alcoholic drink. His family struggles so badly financially that his oldest daughter, Sonia, was forced to register herself as a prostitute to bring funds in for the family to live on. The family is the definition of destitute, and Dostoevsky uses them to symbolize the poor state of the lower class in Russia during his lifetime. The final device that Dostoevsky uses is character foil. A character foil in literature is simply a contrast between characters that show the differences between them. In Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky uses Raskolnikov and his friend Sonia as foils. Raskolnikov, as aforementioned, is a symbol of Western philosophy. He believes strongly in these worldviews and they govern his actions, which are clearly negative. On the other hand, Sonia is a poor girl from a destitute family who earns a living as a prostitute, but she's still a Christian of strong faith in spite of her unfortunate situation. Her belief in God shows that she lives the life of a Slavic Christian, and she ultimately leads Raskolnikov to tell the truth about his murderous actions. Dostoevsky uses her as a contrast to Raskolnikov to show the good of Slavic beliefs and the error of Western philosophy. The author is bringing forward two themes through all of these devices: the negative effect of poverty and worldview conflict. He highlights the horrible impact poverty has on society, and he shows that Western atheistic values are flawed compared to the perfection of Christianity. Crime and Punishment is a painfully realistic story that shows the darkest elements of human nature and deals with some very sad and unfortunate realities. Nevertheless, the literary tools of central focus, experiment in living, symbolism, and foils empower Dostoevsky's theme of poverty and worldview conflict, creating an extraordinarily striking story that is just as unforgettable as an epic fairy tale.